Welp, everybody's making a video about this, so I figured I probably should too. Is Hypixel SkyBlock dying? It's a big question, it's an important question, and it's the one we're going to be talking about today. So if you guys end up enjoying, make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's jump straight into it. Let's start off with some facts, and then we'll start giving opinions and talking about that sort of thing. So SkyBlock is 6 years old now. It came out June 11th of 2019, and this is the average player count for this year. So you can see there's been only 2 or 3 times where it's gone below 30,000 average players within the last year. And that is definitely not a player count to scoff at by any means. 30K is a lot of players, but if you go back and look back even 2 years ago, you can see the lowest player counts here were like 35,000, and we had highs as high as 50,000 and even at one point 80,000 players. And then you go back 4 years and the player count was even higher than that. So just looking at this graph, you can tell in the past 4 years it has 100% been declining. And going back to the 8-year graph, you can see that the highs of like 160,000 players here in 2021, these were the numbers that we were getting even after big YouTubers like Technoblade stopped making videos on SkyBlock. If we go back and look at the SkyBlock version updates that were coming out back then, it was stuff like Revenant Tier 5s and Master Mode Dungeons. Now, I definitely think it's hard to argue with those numbers. Not really possible. The game has definitely gotten less popular in the last few years, and I think that that is definitely largely in part to the fact that there's not really been any late game stuff really added, or even just consistent big updates, like getting Rev Slayer 1 week and then a few weeks later the addition of Master Mode. Like, those were the latest game slayers at the time and the latest game dungeons at the time, just the latest game content at the time, all getting added like back to back to back. And I would say recently we've been getting a lot of mid-game updates, a lot of early game updates, which I do not think is a bad thing. I do think that having some of these earlier game updates added in before you make a big push for some late game content is a good idea, but the fact is, for the last 3 or 4 years, the end game of SkyBlock has been get a Hyperion and get a Terminator. Those are the 2 late game weapons, and just the late game progression has not really seen any major changes. Granted, there's been talismans added and of course new belt slots, that sort of thing, but as far as combat late game goes, there's not been any new weapons. And even when it comes to fishing, farming, mining, there's not really been any late game stuff added. Like, the most recent thing I can really think of is Wiki Tiki Mask being the best in slot helmet, but it's not even the best in slot helmet all the time. If you're not doing hotspot fishing, it's not even the best sea creature helmet. And I know plenty of other YouTubers have said this, but I think one of the biggest issues with SkyBlock right now is it doesn't really feel all that rewarding. There's plenty of long grinds that you can do, like Crown of Avarice or Class Average 50, that sort of thing. But what are you really getting for doing those long grinds? Class Average 50, you get tiny minuscule upgrades to every single class as you max it out, which if all you do is dungeons is nice, but if you do anything besides dungeons, there's no incentive for you to go and do that, which I don't think is the worst thing, because Class Average 50 is a really annoying grind and a really long grind. But I don't think it's that crazy to say that these rewards are not worth 50 plus hours of grinding to go from somewhere like Archer 48 to 50. And the tiny stat boosts you get for increasing the coins on your Crown of Avarice for the amount of hours it takes to grind it out, also really not worth it. And again, smaller things like that aren't that big of a deal, but this is my wardrobe right now, and very few items in it have been added recently. There's the Fig armor, which was added with the forging update, but they had to add something because we literally had nothing, so I don't think this really counts. It's not even going to beat the late game armor in a year. Hopefully it doesn't take them that long to get the next forging island out. Crown of Avarice and Wiki Tiki Mask are about the only recent things that have been added in recent memory. And the only reason I'm using this is because I'm poor. If I wanted more damage, I could use Warden Helmet or an Infernal Crimson Helmet. If I wanted more Magic Find, I could go for a Lucky Clover Helmet. So it's not even the best in slot. But my point is, the meta has not changed like at all in the past few years for really anything. The last major set that I've been using that was added was with the Garden Fermento armor, and this was added on February 14th of 2023, 2.5 years ago. So imagine you quit Skyblock like 2 years ago after grinding out the Fermento set. You've already got your Magma Lord armor. You've got like decent Crimson and Aurora set, a Necron set, some Divans. Like, you have all these late game sets. You come back 2 years later and they're still the best armors in the game for those things. Sure, you might be missing some upgrades, some talismans, of course, some pets, that sort of thing. But really, you're not missing out on too much. Your drills that you had back then, that would still be the best drill in the game. Your farming tools, they're still the best farming tools. Your fishing rods, your Terminator, your Hyperion, all that stuff has not progressed in the last 2 years. And for some of it, longer than that. And I hope and pray that the reason that is because of the foraging update. We can't talk about Skyblock dying without talking about the foraging update, of course. So we waited for foraging for a solid like 4+ years. I lost track of how many years, how many business days it was. And don't get me wrong, I really do enjoy the foraging update. I thought it was fun. I like the hunting side of things, and I think it's going to be a great addition to the game once the later islands get added. By itself, it's nice, it's enjoyable. The fact is, I maxed out the update in 2 weeks. That's all it took. And I think one of the biggest disappointments with that update for me personally was just the size of the island. It was way too small. I liked all the things that were added with it, but I would have really liked to see, even if it was on the park, at least just some sort of use of newer mechanics, specifically Elytra or like a trident use or something. I really wanted to see like a Elytra race. But again, with all that being said, I did enjoy the foraging update while I was playing it. It was just I didn't really have that long to enjoy it before I was finished. And again, I could go back and do some Forest Whispers. I could grind out Forest Whispers for another like 40 mil Whispers if I really wanted to. But there's really no point because I know they're going to add new trees and stuff that drop even more Forest Whispers on the future islands. So why would I grind that out now when I know it's going to get an update in the future and it doesn't give Skyblock XP past what I've done at the moment? And I think that's a problem with a lot of updates right now, is they end up dropping, they say they're going to add something to it later that's going to make it more useful or easier to do, or even they don't say that, but we just know it's going to happen. RNG meter for Tarantula Slayer, for example. So what ends up happening is a lot of people just don't play the update until that part 2 of the update comes out that makes everything easier. And it's smarter to play that way. Can't really blame them for doing that. In total, it's going to take them less time to max out the update if they wait until its counterpart gets added. And we could get into the whole conversation about whether Nank Feathers were a good addition or not. I think we're going to see some problems with that in the future. I don't think they're as visible right now. There's plenty of issues with it right now. Just look at handle prices. But I'm not going to dive into that too much. You've heard it from plenty of other people by now, I'm sure. But let's just come out and answer the question. Is Hypixel SkyBlock dying? I don't think so. But I think it is definitely getting sick, per se. Now let's talk about some solutions. I think the first and biggest issue that we've had up to this point is 100% being told about updates before they're ready, or even before they're going to be confirmed to come out. I'm going to make a video about this very soon, talking about updates that have been announced throughout the years that still haven't come out. And I thought I had a pretty long list of them in my head. When I went back through all the patch notes, I went and read through all the previous patch notes, all the alpha patch notes I could find. The list was way longer than I thought it was. The amount of updates that I completely forgot that I was really looking forward to is actually so sad. Remember the Better Mayors update when that came out and we got like the Diana changes, we got Cole changes, we had Marina changes. All these mayors got 4 perks and they left out Paul and Aatrox. Remember that? They still haven't added the 4th perks for Paul and Aatrox. I believe it's been over a year now. There's one I know a lot of people have been talking about that still hasn't come out. That was announced nearly a year ago now. RNBWs. There's just so many updates that they told us about way too early before they were ready or even being worked on. I think that's one of the reasons the foraging update kind of fell flat for a lot of people, was just because we kind of knew what was happening before it happened. We were told about everything that was going to be added on the alpha like a year before it came out. The only real like surprises for me, to be honest, that I knew like nothing about was the True Fire Trial or whatever, the Soul Fire system, which is just the re-edition of the fire system on the parts, just a remake of that, literally copy paste. And I want to say that the booster system, like the sweep boost and that type of thing, I didn't know about before it came out. I don't think they said anything about that, but they could have said something. They said so much stuff, I might have forgotten about it. But just in case I haven't made my point, they definitely gotta stop telling us about stuff too early. And before they go on my first point of changing the way that progression works by, like, you know, adding new progression items, we really haven't gotten any new progression in a long time. They kind of got to fix the progression that we have going on right now. Most of the time that I see players quitting is around like level 300 to 400, and that's because that's the point of the game where you start doing the exact same things that you've been doing for ages over and over again, especially for Iron Man players. The best money making method in the game, and it has been for a while now, is mining diamonds in the Mines of Devon or the Royal Mines with a glossy mineral setup. So if we go ahead and look at our Heart of the Mountain right now, all these perks from tier 8 and above, they're basically useless to Iron Man players. They don't use any of these unless they're going to try and drop like a Pendant of Devon or something like that. Other than that, they use tier 7 and below because their best money making method in the game is still into Dwarven Mines. The best money making method in the game to NPC should not be in an island that you unlock at mining level 12. That is 110% a problem. And I believe the second best method for them right now is farming, for pest farming. So they go and farm for pests, and then they sell the drops from pests to NPC unless they need to use them for like composter or visitors, etc. That's their other good money making method. So if you're an Iron Man player and you want to progress in dungeons, you just sit there and farm, or you sit there and mine for hundreds or thousands of hours if you want to progress further in the game. So that's 100% an issue for Iron Man players specifically. I think main progression is definitely a little bit better. I believe the best money making methods for mining right now are inside the glaciite tunnels. If you're on a regular profile, you can umber or tungsten mine, or you can mineshaft grind with a party while doing umber and tungsten mining. So it's definitely not as bad if you're not an Iron Man player. And also for non-Iron Man players, Dungeons is about to get a pretty massive buff with Dungeon Breaker. It's going to make your runs a lot faster, so that means Dungeons is going to make a lot more money, or at least you're going to get a lot more runs in per hour. So you'll be able to get to the higher kata levels faster and do the higher floors that make more money faster. So that is going to help a bit with the combat progression. I do think dungeons are a very, very long grind to get all the way up to kata 50, much less class average 50. But I also think Slayer progression is a little bit wacky right now. And the main issue with it, honestly, is just Blaze Slayer specifically. I think Terminator coming from E-Man is completely fine. E-Man's at a pretty good point in the game where you're starting to get into the mid/late mid game before you go for the Terminator, unless you're buying carries and trying to skip, that sort of thing. But if you actually go and solo grind for Term, generally you end up at a pretty good place. By the time you can handle E-Man tier 4s, you can usually do enough damage with Terminator to be able to start handling the early Master Mode floors and F7, that sort of thing. And you don't even need damage from it to be able to do Kudra. I think that part's fine. It's just Blaze Slayer really doesn't have anything going for it. You get an SOS flare from it, and that's really it. I mean, Hab Tactics is really nice, don't get me wrong. It definitely makes all of your other Slayer grinds easier, but there's no reason to go do any other Slayer grinds after you've done Blaze Slayer. I'm doing Revs right now because I'm a weirdo and I like Revs, but most people at my level and my position would be doing Blaze Slayer right now because that's the Slayer that makes the most money. And the only real reason it makes money right now is Inferno minions and Hab Tactics, which a lot of people are probably going for right now because of Guardian Slayer, which hopefully will change things up. Personally, I'm hoping Guardian Slayer is at a spot like either in between Sven's and E-Man, or between E-Man and Blaze, kind of bridge the gap a little bit, because for me personally, it took me a pretty long time to get from the point where I was doing like T4 E-Man to get to the point where I was doing T4 Blaze. It is a pretty long grind. You have to stop and go do Kudra to be able to get your Crimson gear up, invest a bunch of money into your daggers, invest a bunch of money into Inferno minions, etc. So it'd be nice to have a spot in between that, or a spot between Sven's and E-Man, because the bridge between Sven's and E-Man is also a pretty big gap as well. So I'm very curious to see how that ends up turning out. And I think that curiosity is part of the reason that I'm looking forward to future updates, because again, they haven't done the same thing they did with Forging update and just told us everything that was happening. It's going to be pretty much a complete surprise when it drops on the main server or on alpha. I think that's a good thing. The last time we had a shadow drop per se was whenever we got the Rift Mountaintop added onto the main server. They didn't put it on alpha or anything. They just dropped it on the main server, gave us a heads up that they were going to do maintenance on a certain day, so we knew that it was coming out. But other than that, we had no idea what was getting added with it until it dropped on the server. And I think that was one of the best update drops that they've ever done. And if they could recreate that sense of just complete awe whenever something comes out on the main server, that would be awesome. I do think it's very difficult to do. They've done a great job of squashing dupes and that sort of thing recently, but I know every time an update comes out on the alpha, there's always some balancing issues that have to get worked out first before it comes out on the main server. So if they could get to the point where they're comfortable with their balancing changes, they have a good team that can do all of that behind the scenes, that would be amazing. But I don't know if we'll ever get to that point. It would be great, but who knows. But I think that about wraps it up. I got a little bit ranty there in the middle. I apologize, but I'm very passionate. This is literally like my future is kind of hanging on the balance of this right here, at least the way that my future will look. So I would very much enjoy continuing to create content on this game, and it would be very difficult for me to do that if it died. So did my best not to be too harsh about anything. If there's any admins watching, I'm sorry if I was, but I do think the admins have done a great job in the past. It's just Forging specifically, honestly, has kind of gotten us to a standstill recently. We were in a point of, all right, we'll have some great things to do when Forging comes out, and then Forging came out, and we played it for 2 weeks, and then we went back to our normal stuff. But as always, I'm hopeful for the future. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. In conclusion, we need something new to aim for as endgame players. We need more surprise updates like Mountaintop, and we really gotta fix Iron Man. But y'all have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. God bless.